So as everyone knows, farming artifacts in Genshin is very painful, of course, but we do it anyway because you want your best artifacts for your favorite characters. So when you get a new character, you go online, you do some research, you learn what the best set to farm is, and then you begin the long grind. Except what if I told you that there's crucial mistakes that many guides make with the artifacts they recommend, and actually you shouldn't have been grinding for that set in the first place? So before I get into the guide, I just want to clarify that this video is not about criticizing other guides and other creators and saying how they're all wrong. I would say it's just me sharing things I've learned, and honestly some of this stuff is so nerdy that you can't really expect other larger content creators to really know these things. It is what it is. As always, be nice to other creators, and yeah, let's get on with the video. So starting off with lyney. Now you might be shocked to see this, maybe not, depending on whether you watch my streams or not, since I do talk about this a lot, but I've never made an actual video on this. So lyney came out in 4.0, same patch as we got this new domain with marechaussee hunter and golden troupe. And as you can see, lyney drains HP with his charge attacks, and then he heals with his elemental skill. And this set gives a ton of crit rate when you do stuff like that on your character. So it seems obvious that this is his signature set. So all over online, the guides, calculations, leaderboards like this say to use the marechaussee hunter set. If that's the case, then you might be asking, why do so few professional lyney mains actually use the set? I'm using mixed, this player's using mixed, all sorts of players are using mixed. It doesn't make sense, right? Like, after all, you get 36% crit rate here, that's no joke. So what is the plot twist? The plot twist is, unless you're playing lyney in a vaporized team with furina, then the 4P set is actually super scuffed on him. So I'm going to go through some points. Number one, how buffs in Genshin works. You don't really get the buffs on the hit that activates the buffs. So for example, if his charge attack lowers his HP, then that charge attack doesn't get extra crit. Number two, his hats actually snapshot buffs. So that means if your charge attack didn't have the crit buff, then neither did the hats. Number three, marechaussee hunter crit rate buffs only last 5 seconds at a time. And number four, in many situations, you don't actually play lyney like his theoretical optimal playstyle is. He's actually pretty flexible. So let me show you some gameplay examples if I was using marechaussee hunter. So in a mono pyro team, actually quite often you use lyney's burst early. As you can see, it's great AoE damage, and also it has iframes to stop you from getting hit. So since I haven't lost HP, I haven't used a charge attack yet, that means this burst would have no crit. In fact, the burst basically doesn't benefit from this artifact set at all. Now I do a charge attack, and this only drains HP after, as we said, so it doesn't have crit either. And remember the hat snapshot, so it has no crit either. I only actually start benefiting from the 4P set here, but in fact I actually use a lot of charge attacks here. This isn't very common. Here's another example. I just finished setting up with my team, and I do a charge attack here on lyney, which again, it won't have any crit rate. Same thing with the hat I produce. And now I use his burst for the invincibility frames, which would have only 1 stack of crit. And the other thing, as we said, marechaussee hunter crit rate only lasts 5 seconds. So if I used my charge attack at 9:48 on the clock and I'm switching to Quasar, the crazy thing is I don't even know if I'm getting the crit rate buff here, because it says 9:42. So yeah, it means I'm probably only getting 1 stack, so 12 crit rate for this nuke again. So yeah, the thing is, as you may have experienced, only doing 2 or 3 charge attacks per fight is actually pretty common. And as you see in these situations, you can easily be playing in a way where you're not actually getting much crit throughout your fights. So if you are building your lyney around getting 36% crit rate from the set, your default build probably has low crit rate, something like this. Actually, in many cases, all this really means is you could have trash crit rate for most of your fight. Do you want to be playing with 50 crit rate half of the time? I don't think so. So I would say at that point, you're better off using mixed sets with guaranteed buffs and high crit, and then just having more consistent fights. And remember that this is also buffing your skill and burst damage. Not to mention, you probably also have better substats on mixed sets anyway. So I would say use an 18% attack set like Shimenawa or Gladiator, or even 15% pyro damage from Crimson Witch or Flames. Whatever is your best pieces, I think you'll get better results. So I think the reason why calculations and leaderboards like this favor 4-piece marechaussee hunter, as you can see, is if you look here, they're doing very fixed combos. You can see here 3 charge attacks, then the burst, then the skill. I think there are even some calculations that use 4 charge attacks too. But as I mentioned, how often are you actually doing this? Especially since these stacks last 5 seconds, as I said. That means anytime you switch off lyney, maybe to regroup or reshield or run towards enemies, then you risk losing your stacks. Of course, in calculations, you can always stay on lyney, but practically, you will need to adjust to fights and switch out when you need. But as I said, if you are playing him with furina, maybe a team like this, then furina is of course draining lyney's HP very quickly, so you do get crit rate buffs quite easily. Then I would say at that point, farming 4-piece marechaussee hunter will be worth it. But most people play mono pyro teams, something like this or with zhongli, and in that situation I wouldn't say it's worth it. Just use mix sets with high crit rate and guaranteed damage. Okay, next we've got Childe. So Childe has 2 signature sets at this point, but they're both garbage. Well, they're both trash for different reasons. Heart of Depth. This was designed early in the game, you could say before the developers really knew how Childe's playstyle would turn out. The issue with this is you're buffing normal attacks and charge attacks, but you're not going to be buffing his burst and a lot of his riptide damage. And those are arguably even more important. So you're better off just using a mix set, which not only probably has better substats than your Heart of Depth set, but you're also buffing his whole kit here, maybe getting some nice EM. In fact, even 2-piece noblesse can be very good because his nuke damage is the main thing you want to build him around anyway. And then last year they ended up releasing another set, which is Nymph Dream, and on the surface it's written like Polar Star. You can see here the wording is very similar, so it does seem perfect for Childe. Let's say in general it could be a 5 to 10% upgrade with equal substats. So surely this is better than a mixed artifact set now. Well, no, the issue is if you look closely, this buff duration is lasting 8 seconds. The issue is that the buff duration is shorter than Polar Stars, and it also isn't that big of an increase over mixed sets anyway. But yeah, back to the buff duration point, you can see this artifact set lasts 8 seconds, whereas Polar Star stacks last 12 seconds. And this is actually a very big deal because, as you know, international can have complex setups, which if you're doing full setups can end up being pretty long. To consistently get these full buffs on Childe, you can't do certain setups. So to get these buffs on Childe's burst, you need to use Childe's burst within 8 seconds, and that timing is really tight. And what this means is you probably have to use Xiangling's burst after Childe's burst now, which you can work around, it's fine, but the issue is that you used to be able to have flexibility on when you might want to cast Childe's burst, when you might want to use Pyronado, when you might want to use Cardinal's grouping, and it's quite a big deal. Using this set, you would have very little flexibility on things like positioning and things like needing to do extra hold skills on Cosworth for better grouping, and if you want to delay certain characters' bursts, especially on a team like International that prides itself on flexibility, so being forced to be more rigid is definitely an L. The other problem is, guess what else lasts 8 seconds? The Instructor set. So of course a lot of the time people use noblesse on Bennett, but sometimes if you want the max damage in your international team, then the Instructor set can just be stronger. Not only do you get EM buffs on Childe and Xiangling, but you also get to boost Kazu's EM, which in turn increases the buffs he gives to the rest of the team. So if you can use Instructor, then it's very good in this team. But the issue is, both set buffs last 8 seconds. So because Childe is using one and then Bennett is using one, you can't use both at the same time. So the issue is the EM is so good that not using Instructor, you can end up cancelling out a lot of the buff you would have got from switching to Nymph Stream. And then on top of that, Childe isn't the only damage dealer in this team. You'll just be losing EM and damage on Xiangling too. And then on top of that, even if you grind for ages, you're probably not even getting a 4-piece set similar to your mixed set pieces like this. So it's just not worth it. Just stick to a mixed set, honestly. One of the best things about Childe is that he can use so many different 2-piece sets, maybe Gladiator, Wanderer's Troupe, Noblesse, Heart of Depth, Shimenawas, Vermilion, and a lot of these can be strongbox too, so you really shouldn't be going out of your way to grind a Nymph Stream domain when it's much easier to get mixed pieces like these. Whatever gives you the best stats, just use it. So the last character in this video, Ganyu. So the issue with Ganyu is that a lot of old guides and theory crafting you might see online, they made the mistake of saying you're not supposed to use Ganyu's burst in melt teams. I'm sure you've heard that a lot, and many of you might believe that still today. The issue is that that's not true, and what it does, it actually creates a butterfly effect where a lot of melt Ganyu advice ends up wrong because of that initial mistake. For example, people farming shimenawa sets for the melt Ganyu instead of Wanderer's Troupe because many thought it was a small upgrade over Wanderer's Troupe, and as I said, it was a butterfly effect. There were other mistakes, like many people believing Hunter's Path, Tighnari's weapon, is Ganyu's best in slot and it's an upgrade over something like Aqua Simulacra or the first Great Magic, when it's not actually. That would only be the case if you don't use Ganyu's burst, which as I said you should be using. And then there's also people believing that Kazuha isn't good with Melt Ganyu, since it can be hard for Kazuha to swirl cryo and buff Ganyu in a team like this, for example, but actually it's much more simple for Kazuha to buff if you are using Ganyu's burst. I know the KQM website says that Shimenawa has issues because it requires precise speed on your charge attacks, but even if you do have precise speed, the main issue is still that you want to use Ganyu's burst, and 4-piece Shimenawa obviously removes energy from her, so that's not good. So why is Ganyu's burst good? One is that it's just free extra damage. The burst damage can add up and some of these hits can even melt. On top of that, as you can see from her talent, using her burst gives her 20% cryo damage bonus. So occasionally you may lose a melt on a charge attack, but that's made up by just doing more damage overall. Secondly, the burst is very helpful for different setups, and you'll definitely notice this since her burst is applying cryo off field now, so it's easier for Kazuha to double swirl. And double swirling with Kazuha, of course, swirling both cryo and pyro is a big help to your team's damage. And even if you're not playing Kazuha, like you need a shield, maybe you're playing Zhongli in a team like this, then it's still worth casting Ganyu's burst for the other reasons. And it can even help you use Instructor on Bennett if you want. So you might be asking, why did guides and theory crafting make this mistake? I would say one of the big reasons is probably due to energy recharge calculations. For example, a tool like this. Now I just roughly inputted some data here. Obviously, most Ganyu melt teams use her as the only cryo character, so you're not generating many cryo particles. Therefore, of course, as you can see, energy recharge calculations can come out very high. Like here, for example, this rough rotation would be wanting 140 ER on her. So when you theory craft, you then decide, is it worth building the 8 or so energy recharge substats to burst this frequently? Or how about you just don't use her burst and instead you get 8 more crit stats or attack percent stats or elemental mastery stats? And as you may or may not know, theory crafting is honestly very black and white like that. When you do calculations, you move stats around to find the best combination. So yeah, in a calc you might find that you deal higher overall damage, not trying to build a ton of ER and instead just going full in on her charge attacks. But of course, the game doesn't play out like a strict simulation like this. A lot of the time you need less ER than you think, and also a lot of the time you don't do full rotations. You need to swap off your main damage dealer early in order to set up against the next set of enemies. Maybe you need to regroup, maybe you need to recast your shield. And also obviously in the real game, you can't just edit your artifacts to trade energy recharge for more crit damage. So for me, a piece like this, I'm just getting free energy recharge here. So with all those examples, using Ganyu's burst when you have it and the off-field cryo helping with your setups, it's just a no-brainer. In fact, Ganyu speedrunners have always been using her burst. So for a long time there has been huge gameplay contrast with how those guys play her and how the guides say to play her. But her burst is also not just useful for speedrunners, it's also useful for casual players too. Like I said, it's just free damage. Her burst is guaranteed off-field damage, so even if you're not the best at charge attacks, you'll still slowly be chipping away at enemies' HP with her burst. It's just a good idea to be using her burst no matter what type of player you are. So yeah, overall, Wanderer's Troupe is the best set and what I would recommend farming. And you also get this from fighting Ascension bosses, so you probably already have pretty good pieces anyway. And yeah, please don't spend wishes on the new Chronicle Wish banner. 24 Hunter's Path for your ganyu, it's not worth it. If you want a weapon, just save up for either Aqua Simulacra or the first great magic. That's my advice. Anyway, that's it for today's video. I hope you guys found this useful. Maybe it saves you a bunch of resin you could be using elsewhere, or maybe you might feel sad because you've already farmed these sets and you're just learning now that it wasn't worth it. Either way, there's also a few other characters I could talk about in a video like this, so let me know if you guys would like a part 2 and I could discuss some other characters. And yeah, thanks for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed this.